All right, let's welcome in Andy Staples. Of course, you guys know Andy Staples, covering college football for On3. Seemingly been doing so for a long time in one way or another. Andy covering college football, that is. Welcome in, brother. Good to have you on board. Thanks for joining me.
I appreciate it, Jeff. We're doing a home and home. So you're on my show, I'm on your show. It's beautiful.
It's the way it should be. All right, educate me on Florida. Obviously, from a distance, I've watched them give up a lot of points, and
Yeah.
I've seen Coach Napier struggle with some things that you famously asked a question about some special teams troubles, and I don't think he liked that question.
Oh, that was Nick Delatorre. Let's not blame me on that one. That was Nick Delatorre from Gators Online.
My
But
apologies.
yes.
I thought it was you.
oh no, it is but that has been a bugaboo all season for them. And the fact that they have an analyst running special teams only exacerbates the problem and makes it look worse. But yes, Florida State might expect 10 guys on the field during extra points and field goals. It's happened a few times.
I think they'll welcome that, but I got to ask you, what's at the root of that? You and I talked when Billy Napier was hired, and Billy was a guy that a lot of programs liked. He was an emerging star in the coaching ranks, and everything you ever read about him was that he was going to be very careful about which job he took. It had to be the right fit. They had to see eye to eye from the top on down, the president, athletic director, what he wanted to do, his vision for all of that. So I always thought this was a guy that was as buttoned up as you could hire and would probably make sure that everything was in proper order. And yet we've seen like these kinds of mistakes for 2 years. In your mind, why is that?
Well, yeah, it was interesting because he came in this reputation of being very detail oriented. It does seem he's very detail oriented off the field, but on game day, it doesn't seem like they're that buttoned up. It seems like they're a little bit loose and sloppy, and they've got to fix that. And he's going to have to overhaul the staff in the offseason. I think, I don't think he's getting fired. His buyout is too big. Half of it would be owed. So the buyout's $32 million. Half of it would be owed within 30 days, I believe. That's not something Florida is usually willing to even contemplate. So, but making changes would be. So he has 2 offensive line coaches. Their offensive line is not very good. Perhaps go to the standard 1 offensive line coach, use that other spot for a special teams coordinator, maybe. He calls the plays. It's very similar to Florida State where Mike Norvell calls the plays. The difference is Mike Norvell has proven himself an effective Power 5 play caller, and Billy Napier hasn't. So I think he's going to hire someone to do that. I think, the team that Florida played on Saturday, Missouri, one of the reasons they're better is that Eli Drinkwitz took a look in the mirror and said, I'm a better head coach if I'm not calling the plays. And so he hired Kirby Moore, who's been fantastic, and they're having a great year. I mean, they're 9-2, probably going to go 10-2, probably going to beat Arkansas. So it's really, it depends on the person, because I think Mike probably wouldn't be as good if he didn't call plays. That's part of what makes Mike Norvell who he is. I don't know that Billy Napier needs to be doing that. So that part has to get squared away in the offseason. The special teams coordinator has to be squared away in the offseason. I don't know if they're going to make a change at defensive coordinator, but remember that the defensive coordinator situation was a little bit rushed this past offseason. They had Patrick Toney, who had come with Billy Napier from Lafayette, but Toney gets an NFL job. They go hire Austin Armstrong, who had been recently hired by Alabama as the linebackers coach. Remember, Alabama hires Kevin Steele as the defensive coordinator. They hire Austin Armstrong, who's a young guy. I believe he's only 30, as the linebackers coach. So Billy grabs him, and he doesn't have a lot of talent to work with, but they certainly haven't made it look any better. It looks just as bad as the defenses under Dan Mullen looked at the end, and possibly worse. So they've got to figure out if that's something they want to make a change with, or do they want to say, no, it's the personnel. We'll just get better personnel, which the other issue with Florida right now is they are very young. Tons of freshmen, especially on defense, having to play. And that's probably good for the future, not great for right now, especially playing against a fairly veteran Florida State offense.
kind of curious what the mood in Gainesville is, Andy, because, if you have a young team and a coach that's, had some bumps in the road here, but that's kind of normal. Are they still with him? Is this a fan base that is patient right now? I know historically
No.
that's not the case.
This is a fan base that's never patient. It is interesting because you do see some people saying, look, at a certain point, you got to stop the roller coaster. Like, you have to stick with a guy. And I think Florida State had that realization as well. The difference is Florida State didn't have the money to fire Mike Norvell when things looked bleakest. And if they had, maybe the situation would have been different. But giving Mike Norvell time has brought this, And I will say, and here's the one thing you could tell with Mike Norvell. Like, I'll go back to that 2021 season. I think they started off 0-4. He has that famous press conference answer when he's like, I know what it's going to look like. Right. I know what it looks like at practice. We're not doing anything different. We're just going to keep doing this, and it's going to work. And when you heard that originally, you're like, okay, that's what they all say. And sure, but I played that clip for Norvell before the season and said, did you believe that yourself? He's like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you could tell, like, he felt like this group could do this. And, I think a lot of it is, it's not just the coaches. It's also somewhat the players. Like, Florida State had a group that was mentally tough, that pushed through the losing streak in the 2022 season and said, you know what? We're better than this. We can do better than this. And I will say one thing that encouraged me about Florida this year that I wasn't sure I was going to see was the way they played against Missouri. And it's interesting because it feels like the Florida fans are more mad about what happened at Missouri than they are about what happened at LSU. And I didn't get that. Like, after the LSU game, that's when they should be screaming fire everybody, especially on defense. But they were just kind of resigned to everything. And then you get to the Missouri game, and they're fighting their asses off against a really good team on the road. And yeah, they lost. Yeah, it looked bad. Yeah, you gave up 4th and 17. But this was a bunch of freshmen on defense, a young offense, an offense playing with a backup quarterback, just, like Florida State. Florida lost its starting quarterback in the middle of the game. And they were still fighting, which Mike Norvell, I think, would probably tell you that is a great sign. Like, that's what you want to see. But I just think it's interesting. The thing we don't know about this Florida team is we've seen Florida State do this multiple times where they've gotten up off the mat and fought their way back. We don't know if this young group will do that at Florida. They've never been in this situation before. So it's one of two ways. Do you lay down, or do you say, you know what? We need 15 extra practices. We need to go to a bowl game. Let's try to shock the world here. That's the attitude that the Florida State guys, when they were younger, took. We'll see if Florida does.
It'd be less of a shock now that Jordan Travis is out, and that brings me to the question about quarterback, which you just brought up. Who's Max Brown? What do we need to know for Florida State fans watching this, listening to this, about Max Brown? I know he's 6'2", 220. I know that he's, 10 of 12 in his career. He got in against Vanderbilt. I know that he can run around a little bit, but tell me about this kid.
Well, from Oklahoma, and came to Florida last year, and the thought was that kind of a bridge to DJ Lagway. DJ Lagway is the quarterback from Willis, Texas, who's the 2024. I believe he's the number 2 quarterback in the class, number 1, depending on what recruiting service you're looking at. But we go by on 3, of course, here. But it felt like Max had kind of gotten lost in the shuffle a little bit because Graham Mertz has another year of eligibility if he wants it. So Graham could be the starter, and you bring DJ along without forcing him into the starting job. But the thing about Max is you knew he was a good athlete. The arm looked good. So the thought is if he gets into a game, then he might show you something. And he did. He came in at the Missouri game against a pretty good defense, and Ladarius Henderson, one of the scariest pass rushers in the country, he didn't look scared at all. And I thought that was really impressive. And because it's one of those things you just never know until the person gets into the game. I go back, like with Florida State, to Tate Rodemaker last year against Louisville.
Yeah.
I had no idea what Tate Rodemaker would be when he got in that game. Now we know. And then when Tate got into the game against North Alabama, you knew what you were going to get. You probably know what you're going to get with Tate against Florida. So Max, I think that was his first chance. So we've really only seen a quarter and a half of him, but he's a big guy. He can move, and it looks like he understands that offense. Now, it also looks like they finally started to understand what they can do with Trevor Etienne. That's the one thing that, because Montreal Johnson's a good back. Trevor Etienne's ceiling is very high, probably much higher than Johnson's. And you wondered when they were going to say, okay, let's do more with this guy. And it felt like against Missouri that they realized this is our star. Let's let him be our star.
Will they run Max a lot in this game, do you think? Florida State, all teams struggle with mobile quarterbacks. I always hear fans say, oh, we struggle with a mobile quarterback. Everybody does. But will they run him? Is he that kind of an athlete?
Yes. Yeah, he can move. And they will need to do whatever they need to do. Like this is desperation for Florida because they want to be bowl eligible. And the idea of getting that extra practice is huge for them. So they'll do everything they can do. Now, you realize if you lose Max, the offense suddenly becomes really bad. But at this point, it doesn't even matter.
Right.
They have to win this game if they want to go to a bowl game. There's really no tomorrow here.
Do you get a sense, Andy, last thing, do you get a sense of what Florida team we'll see? Is it going to be the latter? Is it going to be a desperate team that plays really hard, an opportunity to spoil Florida State's season, their hated arch rival, an opportunity to get bowl eligible? Will they fight for Billy Napier? Is this the Florida we're going to see on Saturday night?
I think they're going to fight. I do. It reminds me a lot of Florida State under early Norvell. I don't know if the result's going to be the same ultimately. There's some other parts of it that aren't the same. But the way the players react to the coaches seems very similar, where they seem to be pretty nice bond, pretty willing to fight for one another. And I think you're going to see probably this Florida team's best shot at Florida State. I don't know if that's good enough, even with a backup quarterback playing for Florida State. But I do think the Florida State will get their best shot.
I think you and I are starting to trend towards this being a shootout, buddy. And
I don't know if they're gonna be great for either defensive coordinator. Both of them probably gonna have a pretty rough day.
Appreciate you, buddy. Good to talk to you. As always, he's Andy Staples on 3, of course, and you can watch and listen and do all those things that you should do to Andy Staples and hopefully the Jeff Cameron Show as well. So I'll see you down there, buddy. Be good.
All right. See you, Jeff.
Yep. Take care.